All right, let's dive into a world that's way more exciting than it might sound at first glance. The hormones of the posterior pituitary gland. We've got a physiology handout here. And trust me, these tiny chemical messengers, they play some seriously big roles in how our bodies function.
Absolutely. We're talking about just two key players today, but their impact is huge. Vasopressin, also known as ADH, and oxytocin.
Two hormones, but they're both actually synthesized in the hypothalamus. That's like the brain's command center, right?
Exactly. But they're stored and released from the posterior pituitary gland, which acts more like a dispatch center, sending these hormones out into the bloodstream when they're needed. They travel down the axons of neurons, from the hypothalamus to the posterior pituitary, kind of like a specialized delivery system.
Okay, let's start with vasopressin, or ADH. What's fascinating about this one is that it seems to have two completely different jobs.
It does. One of its primary roles is maintaining the balance of fluids in your body. It acts on what we call V1 receptors, causing blood vessels to constrict, and that directly impacts your blood pressure.
So if you're dehydrated, your body uses ADH to increase blood pressure by narrowing those vessels.
Exactly. But it also has another important job, working on V2 receptors in the kidneys. Here, it promotes water reabsorption, which is essential for keeping you hydrated.
So it's like ADH is playing both offense and defense when it comes to your hydration levels. But how does your body know when to release ADH?
Well, one trigger is plasma osmolality. That's basically a measure of how much salt is in your blood. If the concentration gets too high, special sensors in your hypothalamus, called osmoreceptors, they sound the alarm.
So it's like a built-in system that says, hey, we're getting too salty here. Time to dilute things.
Exactly. And those sensors trigger the release of ADH, helping your body hold on to more water to bring that salt concentration back down. Another key factor is extracellular fluid volume. If your body senses that you're low on fluids overall, ADH production ramps up to conserve what you have.
Makes you realize how important ADH is for maintaining that delicate internal balance. But I read here that even emotions can play a role in ADH levels. Is that true?
It is. Ever notice how you get thirsty after a stressful meeting? That's your ADH kicking in, conserving water due to the stress response.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that. It makes total sense, though. But what happens when ADH production gets out of whack? What are the consequences of having too much or too little of this hormone?
Well, on one hand, you have diabetes insipidus, which is caused by either a deficiency of ADH or by the kidneys not responding to it properly.
This isn't the same as the more common diabetes, right?
Exactly. Diabetes insipidus is all about fluid balance. People with this condition can't retain water effectively, so they experience excessive urination and constant unquenchable thirst. Imagine having to drink 15 to 20 liters of water every day just to stay hydrated.
That's mind-boggling.
It underscores just how crucial ADH is for our well-being. But then on the flip side, you have SIADH, which stands for Syndrome of Inappropriate ADH Secretion.
So in this case, the body is producing too much ADH. What kind of problems does that create?
Yeah, the main issue is water retention. SIADH can lead to what's called water intoxication, which may sound harmless, but can actually be very dangerous because it dilutes the sodium in your blood.
That's a good reminder. The too much of a good thing, even something as essential as water, can throw your body out of balance.
Precisely. Balance is key.
Okay. That was a lot to unpack about ADH. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the other hormone on our list, oxytocin. It gets a lot of attention as the cuddle hormone, but it sounds like its functions go way beyond just warm and fuzzy feelings.
It definitely does. While oxytocin does play a role in social bonding, it also has crucial roles in other areas, like childbirth and breastfeeding.
All right. Let's dive into those. Tell me more about what oxytocin does during childbirth.
Well, it stimulates powerful contractions of the uterine muscles. These contractions help propel the baby through the birth canal. What's really interesting is that as labor progresses, the stimulation of the birth canal actually leads to even more oxytocin release, creating a positive feedback loop.
So the more the baby moves, the more oxytocin is released, and the stronger those contractions become. That's an amazing natural mechanism.
It is. Oxytocin is also essential for milk ejection during breastfeeding. When a baby suckles, it triggers the release of oxytocin, which causes the myoepithelial cells in the mammary glands to contract, pushing the milk out.
So it's not just about producing the milk. Oxytocin is key for delivering it as well.
That's fascinating. What else does this multifaceted hormone do?
Well, there's some evidence that it plays a role in sperm transport within the female reproductive tract, which could mean it's involved in conception as well.
Wow, really? So oxytocin could be involved in both the beginning and the continuation of life?
It seems that way. And it may even have a role in male reproductive health, possibly assisting in the transport of sperm from the testicles.
So it's potentially involved in fertility for both men and women.
Exactly. And there's more. Oxytocin also influences the activity of the apocrine sweat glands.
Those are the ones that give us that lovely stress sweat.
Right.
Well, yes, but they also play a role in producing scents that are thought to be involved in attraction.
So you're telling me that oxytocin could be linked to attraction. That's incredible.
While it's not quite a love potion, it does suggest that oxytocin's influence on our social interactions might be even more profound than we realize.
It's amazing how one hormone can have such a diverse range of functions. But all of this makes me wonder, what are the consequences of having too much or too little oxytocin?
That's a great question, and one that researchers are still exploring. While we know that oxytocin plays a role in social bonding, anxiety, and stress, the precise effects of imbalances are complex and not fully understood.
It sounds like there's still so much to learn about this incredible hormone.
Absolutely. But even what we know so far is fascinating, wouldn't you say?
Completely. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the roles of vasopressin and oxytocin in regulating fluid balance, blood pressure, childbirth, breastfeeding, and even possibly attraction.
We've seen that these two hormones from the posterior pituitary gland are far more than just simple chemical messengers. They influence our bodies and our social interactions in ways that we're only beginning to understand.
All right. That's it for part 1 of our deep dive into the hormones of the posterior pituitary. Join us for part 2, where we'll delve into some of the cutting-edge research that's shedding even more light on these remarkable hormones.
Welcome back to our deep dive into these tiny but mighty chemical messengers.
Still reeling from all the amazing things we learned about vasopressin and oxytocin in part 1, who knew they did so much?
And we're just getting started. In this part, we're going to explore some cutting-edge research that's revealing even more about their potential.
Okay, I'm ready. What have scientists been discovering?
Well, let's start with oxytocin. We talked about its nickname, the cuddle hormone. But recent research suggests it might be much more than just a feel-good chemical. Scientists are investigating its potential in treating a whole range of conditions, particularly those related to social behavior and mental health.
That's intriguing. So we're talking about things like anxiety or even depression.
Exactly. Studies have shown that giving oxytocin can actually increase trust, empathy, and social interaction in people with autism spectrum disorder.
So it's like helping them feel more comfortable and engaged in social situations. That's remarkable. What about other mental health conditions?
Researchers are looking into that too. There are ongoing studies into the use of oxytocin for conditions like social anxiety disorder and even post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
That makes sense if you think about how traumatic experiences can lead to feelings of isolation and distrust. Could oxytocin help rebuild those social connections?
That's the hope, of course. More research is needed to see how effective and safe it is in the long run. But it's a very promising avenue of research.
So oxytocin might hold the key to new therapies. What about vasopressin? Any exciting new developments on that front?
Definitely. Remember how crucial vasopressin is in regulating fluid balance and blood pressure?
It's like the ultimate multitasker, keeping everything running smoothly.
Precisely. And because of that, researchers are investigating its potential in managing all sorts of medical conditions. For instance, there are synthetic versions of vasopressin, called analogs, that are already being used to treat bleeding disorders.
So if someone is experiencing excessive bleeding, vasopressin can help to constrict those blood vessels and stop the flow.
Yes. It can be especially effective in cases of gastrointestinal bleeding or bleeding that occurs during surgery.
Wow. That's life-saving stuff. Are there any other areas where vasopressin might be beneficial?
There's promising research into its use for managing something called septic shock.
Now, that's a serious condition. It's a massive inflammatory response throughout the body, right?
That's right. It's usually triggered by an infection, and it can cause a dangerous drop in blood pressure.
So could vasopressin be used to bring that blood pressure back up?
Exactly. Studies have shown that giving vasopressin to patients in septic shock can help stabilize their blood pressure, increasing their chances of survival.
It's amazing to think that these hormones, vasopressin and oxytocin, aren't just about maintaining normal bodily functions. They could revolutionize how we treat a whole range of medical conditions.
It's like uncovering a hidden toolbox full of potential therapies.
Okay, so we've got oxytocin possibly helping people with social challenges, vasopressin showing promise in managing bleeding and shock. What other exciting research is out there?
Well, Remember we talked about how both of these hormones are produced in the hypothalamus and then travel to the posterior pituitary gland.
Right. It's like a fascinating little delivery system.
Researchers have been digging deeper into the mechanisms behind that delivery system, particularly the electrical activity involved, you see. The neurons that produce vasopressin and oxytocin are called magnocellular neurons, and they generate electrical impulses that travel down their axons.
So it's like an electrical signal that triggers the release of these hormones.
Exactly. And scientists are now able to study these electrical signals in incredible detail. It's like peering into the control room of hormone release.
What kind of insights are they gaining from this research?
They're learning more about how the frequency and pattern of these electrical impulses affect how much hormone is released and when. This deeper understanding could lead to even more targeted therapies that can precisely fine-tune hormone activity.
It's mind-blowing to think that we can now study these processes at such a microscopic level.
It really is remarkable. It's opening up a whole new world of possibilities for understanding and treating a vast range of conditions.
So we've covered a lot in this part. Oxytocin is a potential therapy for social and mental health challenges, vasopressin for bleeding disorders and septic shock, and now this fascinating research into the electrical signals that control hormone release.
It's an incredibly exciting time to be following this field of research.
I completely agree. I can't wait to see what other groundbreaking discoveries emerge in the future. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the hormones of the posterior pituitary gland. It's been quite a journey exploring these chemical messengers, and I have to say, I'm feeling a little bit in awe of them.
I can understand that, even for someone who studies them all the time. The impact of vasopressin and oxytocin on our bodies and our lives is pretty amazing.
Yeah. It's incredible how much influence these tiny molecules have, from regulating our fluid balance to potentially shaping our social interactions. As we wrap up, let's take a moment to highlight some of the key things we've learned. What stands out to you as the most important takeaways from our deep dive?
Well, one thing that always strikes me is the importance of balance when it comes to hormones. We've seen how both a deficiency and an overproduction of vasopressin can lead to serious health issues.
Right, like diabetes insipidus on one end of the spectrum and SIADH on the other. It really highlights the fine-tuning that's going on in our bodies all the time.
And it's not just about physical health either, even with oxytocin, which we often associate with positive emotions. Imbalances can have significant consequences for our social behavior and mental well-being.
It makes you realize just how much power these invisible chemical messengers hold over our physical and even emotional well-being. Another thing that really struck me was the sheer complexity of the endocrine system.
It's a truly intricate network of glands and hormones, all working together to orchestrate the symphony of our bodily functions. And then when you add in the electrical signaling that controls hormone release, it becomes even more mind-boggling.
It's like this hidden world operating behind the scenes, keeping everything in balance. And what's really exciting is that researchers are uncovering more and more about how it all works, opening up incredible possibilities for new therapies.
Absolutely. The potentially using oxytocin to help people with social difficulties, or vasopressin to manage life-threatening conditions like septic shock, is truly groundbreaking.
It's like we're entering a new era of medicine, where we can target specific hormonal pathways to treat a whole range of ailments. It makes me wonder what other amazing discoveries are just around the corner.
I think that's the beauty of science, isn't it? There's always more to explore, more to learn, and I have no doubt that as we continue to delve deeper into the world of hormones, we'll uncover even more fascinating secrets and unlock even greater potential.
Well, I, for one, am hooked. I can't wait to see what the future holds for hormone research. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the hormones of the posterior pituitary gland.
It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating topic with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this journey into the intricate world of vasopressin and oxytocin. Who knew these two tiny hormones could be so impactful? We encourage you to keep learning and stay curious. After all, there's a whole universe of wonder waiting to be discovered, right here within our own bodies. Until next time.